Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video we are going to be talking all about spell books, why I don't recommend them for beginners and how you can utilise them for your successful magical practice. Now when I get emails and when I get comments from beginners, a lot of the time it is, what's the best beginner spell book? Or what spell book would you recommend for beginners? And a lot of the time I will give them the exact same answer, that spell books are not where you should start. And often people will take that information and they will move on with it, but a lot of times I get the response back of, but why? Why can't I do spells right now and get results? Why can't the thing that I want manifest instantly? Why shouldn't I look at spell books? And so a lot of the time I'll end up writing a huge lengthy comment or a huge lengthy response. So I decided to kind of compile all of my thoughts on this subject into a video for anyone out there that's interested in spell books but might be a beginner, or they're interested in spell books and are not quite sure how to best work with them for their own magical practice. So the first thing I suppose I should answer is, what is a spell book? So a spell book is typically a compilation of different spells, rituals, ceremonies and workings. Often they are found in books, on websites, forums with no surrounding information. Now sometimes you will find a spell book that has accompanying information that can be really useful, but a lot of the time a spell book is exactly that. It's a book that's just full of spells and nothing else. So why do I not recommend spell books for beginners? Now the main reason why I don't recommend spell books to beginners is because a spell book is exactly that. It's a book full of spells. And although I would love it to be the case, magic isn't like is seen on TV, in movies, in books. It simply isn't like that. You can't click your fingers or say some words off a page and magically be able to manifest something out of thin air. That's simply not how it happens. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when they do ask me the question of what's the best beginner spell book, that's what they're expecting. They're expecting me to give them a book where they can open it up, pick a spell, read it off with no actual knowledge and be able to manifest whatever they want. And unfortunately, if that was the case, a lot more people would be manifesting everything they could think of without actually learning about magic and witchcraft. Now, the issue I have with spell books for beginners is that they are spell books. They don't have any of the surrounding information. They just contain hundreds, sometimes thousands of different spells and rituals for different intentions and purposes. But witchcraft is exactly that. It's a craft. It's something you learn. It's something you develop. And as much as I would love to twitch my nose like Samantha in Bewitched and magic up something out of thin air, that just isn't how it works. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when they go straight into spell books, will get really disheartened when things don't work for them. And that's something that I always want to avoid if I'm interacting with someone that's interested in witchcraft and magic. I don't want them to get disheartened by trying something and it not working because they don't have the foundation that's needed in order to manifest it. So when I do say to someone, don't go for a spell book, go for this book or go for that book or try this series instead, a lot of the time it brings up a lot of confusion. But the truth behind magic is that it takes a foundation of knowledge. It takes information in order to manifest it. Spells, their wording, rituals, their items, the candles, the crystals, the herbs, the symbols, the sigils, the imagery, it all has significance to that working. It all has importance. And if you don't understand what those things mean in a working, you're never going to be able to get the result that you're after. And that's why a lot of people, when they just buy spell books, they never get the results that they want. I've got a stack of spell books beside me that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later in this video that I do really like. But you'll find in them, there's not very much surrounding information. So a lot of spell books, what they will contain are hundreds, if not thousands of spells that have items, usually candles, crystals, symbols, herbs, cord, that kind of thing. And then they'll also come with accompanying words. Now, if a beginner just steps foot into doing a working and they gather all the items and they say all the words, but they don't have the background information, they aren't doing the energetic aspect to manifest their goal, everything you're doing is just showmanship. That's all it is. It's just for show. They're just props. candles, herbs, cord, symbols, sigils, runes, whatever it might be, has no meaning unless you understand its meaning. A candle is just a candle unless you know why it is in a working. A herb is just a herb unless you know what its purpose is, unless you can energetically connect to it. It's just a bit of plant. Same with crystals. So you can gather together all of these items, you can go out and buy them specially, and you can say these words in this foreign language that you've never heard before. But if you don't understand what any of it means, you don't understand what the herbs mean, you don't understand what the words mean, you have no idea really what you're doing, you're just going through the motion, and that's exactly what it is. If you enter into spell work without understanding how spells work, if you enter into a ritual without understanding how to manifest what you want to achieve, you're literally just going through the motions. You are acting as a practitioner without actually practicing. And it is the biggest flaw with spellbooks, especially spellbooks that are published today. And that is that they are designed to attract beginners in, but inside they often don't hold very much useful information. They will list out a bunch of different spells, but very rarely will you find a spellbook that contains any information about correspondences, any information about elements or deities or spirits or energetic work. A lot of the time, spellbooks expect you to already have an underlying level of knowledge. And that's mainly why spellbooks are so much more useful later on in your magical practice. They are so much more valuable as a more advanced practitioner than as a beginner. Because as a beginner, they're not really going to mean all that much to you. So in reality, there aren't really any beginner spellbooks. There aren't any spellbooks that are really designed for beginners to witchcraft and magical practice, because all spells and all spellbooks require a foundation of knowledge that you really need to develop first. Now, I am planning on coming out with a video on my recommended beginner books, so if anyone is interested in that, stick around on the channel. It will be coming out this year, hopefully soon. Fingers crossed. But ideally, before you start working with spells, you're going to want to gain that foundation of knowledge. Otherwise, it can deter you from continuing your magical studies if you do a working and it just doesn't manifest. It's also important with all spell work that you understand how to protect yourself, how to shield yourself, and that's something that you should really be learning first before you get a spell book and attempt to manifest things. Protections should always come first. So there are no beginner spells because all spells require a foundation of knowledge. But once you've got that foundation of knowledge, spell books can be so useful. I've been using spell books for quite a while, and there are so many different ways that you can work with spell books that are super duper useful for your magical practice. So you've got a foundation of knowledge and you're interested in spell books. What kind of spell book do you buy? What are you looking for? So there are so many spell books on the market. A lot of them are very recently published. I personally tend to avoid the recently published ones, largely because a lot of them have a very Wiccan foundation, which is not an issue at all if you choose to follow a Wiccan path. If you don't want to follow a Wiccan path, a lot of the modern spell books do utilize a lot of Wiccan practice, and so I do tend to avoid them somewhat. As well as that, a lot of the more modern spell books, they are ghost written, or they are often written by people that have studied earlier spell books. So if you're going to buy a spell book, I would personally recommend going for the earlier ones, because you'll often find that that's where a lot of the inspiration for the spells in the more modern books comes from. So I would personally recommend looking for a spell book that contains a wide variety of spells. Things from different paths, things from different traditions, things done in different ways for different intentions. There are some spell books that I own that are for one specific thing, but I think if you're interested in getting a spell book to learn from, to practice from, to study from, then getting a multifaceted spell book is the best way to go, and I'll tell you two of my favorites closer to the end of the video. So if you are getting a first spell book and you've never got one before, it can be good getting a wide variety of spells in the book, not just one type, one intention. There are a lot of books being published today that are for love spells, for prosperity spells, for protection spells, and although they're really great to have, if you're looking for kind of a first one-stop shop book, then get one that covers a lot more topics. Now, before you buy a book, I would always recommend looking at the reviews online. A lot of magical practitioners have a lot of passion with the books that they read and the books that they support. And you'll often find that reviews, particularly on Amazon, give a really good indication on whether that spell book is good or whether it's not so good. So definitely check out the reviews first. So once you've got yourself a spell book, what are the different ways that you can use it? So you've got that foundation of knowledge, you already know how to manifest things, but you're interested in learning about spells, learning about rituals, what goes into it, what goes behind it. Spell books are an amazing thing for this, not necessarily to practice from, but instead to research. A lot of spell books will have spells for a whole range of different intentions and done in a whole range of different styles. And looking at spell books, although you might not want to actively practice any of the spells in the book, and I personally wouldn't recommend copying and pasting the spells inside a book into your real magical practice, they can be amazing to learn from. If you've developed your practice and you really want to get into spell work, making spells, undertaking them, understanding why they work and why they manifest, spell books are a really good option. Go through them, look at the different techniques that different spells employ to manifest the same outcome. A lot of the time you'll find a section on prosperity spells, and you'll find that almost every single spell is done differently. What ties them all together to make it a prosperity spell? Look at the items that are used, the colours, the herbs, the representations. Look at the deities and the spirits and the elements that are connected with. Look at how they do it. Is it with jars? Is it with candles? Is it with sachets? Maybe it's cord magic or higher magic. Have a look at the different ways of doing the same working. Spell books are amazing for going over a huge range of different practices in just a few short pages. Now, if you find a type of working that you're drawn to time and time again, like jar magic, it could be something that you can then go into and look further into in your magical practice. Spellbooks are also really good for recognizing which items represent different intentions. If you're not one that's particularly interested in memorizing correspondence lists, looking at spells in a practical manner can be a really good way of learning what items have which correspondences. So as you're going through the protection spells, have a look at what herbs are being used, what colours, what sigils, what runes, what symbols, what words are they saying, what intentions are they putting into it, and you'll slowly start to see that almost every single spell has connections with another. All of the spells within the same intention will have different threads connecting each and every single one of them. And if you're not one for sitting down and reading hundreds of words, going through just a page of spells can give you a lot of information. It's a different way of learning, of looking into the colours, the herbs, the crystals, the things that make up the workings. It can be amazing for building up that kind of practical knowledge of which herbs, which crystals, which items can really help in your magical practice. So another good way that I like to use spellbooks is I like taking inspiration from them. Spellbooks contain a huge range of different methods, different techniques, some that are way outside your comfort zone or maybe that you've never even heard of before. So it's really great to look at how that particular working is done. If it's a doll working and you've never worked with a doll before, how do they do it? Why do they do it? What do they use? Why do they do it? What does it represent? It's a great way of tapping in and gaining inspiration for different types of workings. So if you know you want to do a love spell, but you're not quite sure what type of love spell you want to do you want it to be a jar, a sachet? Do you want it to be a powder, a candle, an intention working, whatever it might be? Looking through a spellbook can help bring real inspiration and to help kind of light that spark that lets you know the kind of working that you want to do. So from that, you can then take a working out of that book and you can take it apart and you can edit it for your own purposes. Now, I personally don't recommend using spells straight out of a spellbook. I find that spells that have either been adapted by the practitioner or written by the practitioner are best spells to use for really good, successful workings. But if you're just getting started, you might not know how to create a spell from scratch. It might not be something that you're programmed to do yet. It's something that develops over time. And so going through a spellbook can be a really great way of doing it. If you know that you're after a not magic love spell, or you know that you're after a jar prosperity working, look through a spell book, see what ones are already there, take it apart, see what's involved in it, and then edit it. If you feel as though a herb should be in the working that's not in the working, then add it. If you want to take something out, take it out. If you want to combine different types of workings together, you can do that too. It gives you the opportunity to look at pre-made spells and then be able to dismantle them and put them back together again. And it's so brilliant if you're getting used to making your own spells, because you get to see what goes into different people's spells so that you can edit and replicate that within your own personal practice. Now, I would never use spellbooks as the sole focus of study. I would always use it alongside other things, but it definitely helps to open your mind to different practices that you've maybe never thought of before, or different ideas that you're not used to. But it's also a great way of just kind of learning different techniques. So if you don't have that much time to sit and study whole practices, it could be good to just pick a page and go through the different workings on that page and just research little bits of each spell on a daily basis, just to kind of build that information in your mind. And if you want to, you can also use spellbooks for a little bit of kind of divination. If you know that you want to do a protection working, but you're not really sure what kind of protection you need, you know there's something going on, but you're not quite sure what it might be, you can always use bibliomancy, essentially where you ask a question to a book and you flick through the pages and then you just stop on one. And then you can look into that working and see what kind of insights that brings into your life. Do you need that type of working? Is there something, a technique maybe, that you can draw from that working that might be really, really useful to you? That's also a really great way of studying just a little bit every single day. If you pick a spell every single day and look into what makes that working, what items, why they're used, how they're used, what practice that belongs to, you can really help develop your magical practice without having to read huge amounts of books. Because I know that some people aren't able to or don't want to read massive amounts of words and massive books, and this is a really good alternative. And the last reason why I tend to dissuade beginners from spellbooks is that some spellbooks do contain older spells that are taken from old text that's been found elsewhere, where the ingredients are toxic, they're poisonous, they might not be good, and unless you understand your herbs, unless you understand your crystals and how things are done, you might replicate those spells without understanding the dangers behind it. So not all herbs are friendly, not all crystals are safe to be used in specific ways, not all oils are safe. And so I do always think it's good to have a foundation of knowledge beforehand, because some of the spell books I'm going to be mentioning at the end do contain these much, much older spells that are not meant to be replicated word for word. Instead, you're meant to be able to appreciate them, maybe take them apart and utilize aspects of them, but they're not safe to be done in and of themselves. And a lot of beginners do kind of jump in and think, oh, it's an older spell, therefore it's better. And they do run the risk of putting themselves and potentially other people at harm, especially if herbs, oils, items that are not safe are used in these spells. And then at some point within your magical practice, you'll likely not be interested in spell books anymore. A lot of the time, people just stop needing them, they stop using them, they've developed so much within their own practice that they just don't really see the point in them anymore. And you'll end up likely at that point where you create your own spells. You've learned from the books. You've learned about how spells are laid out, the different ways that you can do them, and in the end, that practice of dismantling and putting together your own spells is going to allow you to just create your own out of thin air. You're just going to be able to think of a working, know what type of working you're going to be doing, when you're going to do it, with what items, and it kind of gives you that really good almost mind map of how spells can be made, and then you can replicate that for yourself in your own magical practice. Now, I do have some spell books that I own myself that I do really, really enjoy, and I do want to mention them because a lot of the time I say, don't buy spell books, never buy spell books, avoid spell books, but it's largely because a lot of the people on this channel are new to magical practice. I know some of you are very advanced practitioners, and honestly, thank you for sticking around if you're in this video. But if you are new to magical practice, then I do tend to say avoid spell books. But for those of you that are interested, there are some that I have that are really reasonable. Some I like more than others, but a lot of them do have good information that you can draw from. So the spell books that I do recommend, I have a little stack of them, but I do have one that I'm going to mention first that I don't have in my hands because it's at the bottom of my bookshelf and it's really, really heavy. It's probably my most recommended spell book of all of them. I have two that I really love. This is one of them. It is the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells. Now there are a couple of different versions of this. I'll try and stick an image of it up here. It is a massive book. It's about this thick. It's really big, it's really heavy, and I don't want to even attempt to get it out from the bottom of there. But it essentially contains 5,000 spells that cover loads of different traditions, loads of different historical places and events and situations and paths and traditions, and I love it. Now there is a massive disclaimer at the start of this book that I do recommend people listen to. A lot of the spells in the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells are older spells that contain items that are not safe. Either they contain poisonous herbs or they utilize items in ways that nowadays we would not do because they're taken from older texts. So it is a fantastic book to study from. It's a fantastic book to draw information from, but definitely be wary. Make sure that you double check all of the herbs, all of the items, whatever it may be, because it does contain some rather nasty spells in there, and not nasty for intention, nasty for ingredients. So it's a really fascinating book. I think there's two versions of it. I think there's the Encyclopedia of 1,000 or 3,000, something like that, and then there's the Encyclopedia of 5,000. For the price difference, I would go with the 5,000. I really like that book, and I will list that down in the description box for anyone that's interested. Now I do have a collection of books that are more specific. They are often either a specific intention or a specific type of practice. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend these for your first spell book unless you're really interested in one specific type of magic. But they are really, really decent books. The first is this one. This is Dream Spells by Claire Narmed. Now, I'm not sure if I said that right, so I'm really sorry. But essentially, it's quite an old book now, but it is a book all about dream magic and dream spells. Now, this one does go a little bit into dream interpretation as well as dream associations. So I do really like that. It goes a little bit more in depth. And then it goes into different types of workings that you can do within dream work and how you can go about doing it. Now, I get a lot of questions from people asking about dream magic, different aspects of it, different items, different things that you can do. And this is actually a really decent book. I have to say it is somewhat outdated because it's quite an old book now, I think. But I do actually it's a really sweet book. It's about using dream processes for therapies, about working with spirits and herbs, and it's visiting other worlds. Like, it's a really, really interesting book for anyone that's interested in dream magic. It's definitely worth checking out and just seeing if it can be of any interest to you. I thought it was a really fascinating read. So that one's all about dream spells. The next one is all about protection spells. Now, I do have other books that I prefer for protection magic that I will go into in other book-related videos, but this is essentially just filled with protection spells. Literally filled. So everything from self-trust to charm bags against fatigue, defending your energy, protection amulets, poppets, advanced personal shields, moon magic, basic shields. And this one does actually go into centering and grounding, so I really, really appreciate that. It has a lot of information in it, and I do actually really like this as a book. I don't like many modern books, but this one is actually really good. So this is Protection Spells by Erin Murphy Hiscock. I really, really like this book. If you can get it and you're interested in protection workings, as I said earlier, protection spells and protection rituals and practices are really important. This is a really good book. I have such high praise for this book. I do really, really like it. So the next is Moon Spells. Now this is Moon Spells by Diane. I can't say her surname, so I'm really sorry about that. Diane Ahilquist. I think. I'll put it, all the links will be down in the description box anyway, but this is actually a republication of a much older book, and it's really, really good. It is just full of really good spells if you're wanting to work with lunar energy. So it's not just one type of spell, instead it's one type of magical practice. So in here are spells for love, for protection, for money, for peace. Everything that you can think of is in here, but it's all related to lunar magic. So this is a really good book to learn from if you're interested in incorporating the moon into your spell work. I really like this book. I wish I'd have found it earlier. I only found it when it was republished to look like this. It did look differently on its initial publication, and it's so good. I wish I'd have had this much, much earlier than now, because it is a fantastic book. I know I give some of these books really high praise, but some books I'm a bit, and those two, the protection spells and the moon spells, I really, really like. So the next is Spells for Mindfulness by Pamela Ball. Now, this is one of those where I'm a bit, I do prefer older books to this one, but I have to say, this is probably one of the most affordable spell books I've ever been able to get my hands on, and it does have some really good workings in it. Workings that a lot of books might not have in the same way. So you've got different cleansing spells, protection spells, different techniques, removing obstacles, help making decisions, open up paths. Like, it's got some really decent spells in it. So although there are other books that I do prefer, this is actually really decent, and if you live in the UK, I think you can get this from the Works, which is really good. If not, you can get it on Amazon, and I think it's probably one of the most affordable. It doesn't go over really any true beginner information. It goes into what is a spell, the items, the equipment and ingredients, and then it just kind of goes straight into spells. And that's something that I do have a little bit of an issue with, in that it comes across as though it treats spell work as being science. Like, you put this with this with this, and you say these words and this happens. When most of us that have been within the magical community for any amount of time will know that you can add this and this and this and this and say these words, and unless your energy is there, unless you're releasing that, you're not going to see anything. And that is my only big issue with this book, is that it does kind of skim over the fact that there's energy behind it. So it goes into kind of what crystals are, what herbs are, you know, that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really go into the foundations of magic. So a lot of people will pick it up and they'll see this little introduction section at the start and they'll think, oh, I know everything I need to know now, let's give it a go, and it doesn't work. But the spells inside are really good. I really like them. They're really well made, well written. So I thoroughly appreciate that. I would say use it for the spells, not for the additional information. So next we have this one, this battered looking thing. This is the Modern Witchcraft Book of Love Spells, your complete guide to attracting passion, love and romance by Skye Alexander. Now, I really like Skye Alexander's books. They are amazing books. I really, really like them. And this is really good if you're interested in studying the different types of love spells. This goes over so many. Spell casting with singing bowls. No book I've ever read contains that information. Plant magic, pendulum magic, crystal spells, doll spells, archangel spells if you're interested in working with angels. It's got spells for both separating love as well as attracting love, binding and sealing as well as drawing in. It's got lotions, it's got potions, it's got waters, it's got teas. It's kind of got everything in it. And although I don't like necessarily books that just focus on one thing, I like the variety in this. It's got everything. So if you're a kitchen witch, you can find something in here. If you are an elemental witch, if you work with divination tools, there's so many different things. So I actually really, really like it. I didn't think I was gonna like it. I like Skye Alexander's work, but I didn't think I would like this, and I actually really, really did. And I have other spell books that are like still lingering up there that are like, I don't really like them, but I do really like those. And then the last book on my list is probably one of my favorites. There's two favorites. One is The Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells. I love that book. And then there's this one. This is Spell Weaving, A Complete Guide to Positive Enchantment by Pamela Ball, who is the author of Spells for Mindfulness. But this one is way better. Like, yes, I really like this one. And the only downsides that I do have with this is that there are aspects of Wicca in there, so be prepared for that. It does come into it in some areas, but this goes into so much detail. The only other downside I've got with it is that it is for positive enchantment. So if you're after looking at hexes, if you're after looking at curses, crosses, jinxes, this isn't an ideal book. The Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells is better for that type of work, but for just general spell work, if you're interested in attracting, this is a really good book. And no offense to the author, this one does not contain half as much information. So if you like the look of this one, I would try to find this one on eBay or Amazon because it is so much better, so much better. This one briefly touches on things. This has a section at the start which goes into different traditions. So it goes into polytheism, pantheism, monotheism, atheism, paganism, neo-paganism, high and low magic, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, as well as colour magic, herb magic, candle magic, crystal magic, knot magic, representational magic, symbolic magic, elemental magic, talismans, amulets, charms, consecrating spaces, setting up altars, casting circles, ending rituals. Oh, it goes on. It then goes into nature spirits, forming rituals, worksheets on rituals, spells and formulas, as well as information on what a spell is, and that is only the first chapter. It goes into so much information. This is just the contents. Like, the contents seem to just go on and on and on. And at the back, it even goes into magical alphabets, numerology, talismans, minerals, archangels, elements, as well as designing things, creating things. And then it has a sources page. You guys have no idea. This is brilliant. It's so useful. It goes into some really advanced practices that not many spell books go into. I really like this. It even goes into, you guys recognize this? You recognize this? It's one of the planetary grids that I used for making the sigils. It goes into so much good stuff. Book, amazing. Now, of course there are downsides with it, you know, as with everything there's always going to be downsides. It does have a strong Wiccan influence. I mean, practically the first page of the book says, "and we harm no one." Yeah, very Wiccan influenced. Not saying that that's a problem, but for some people that are after non-Wiccan influenced books, it can be quite difficult to find your way around. But this contains so much information, you can look past it. I swear, you can look past it. I was fortunate enough I found this in a charity shop for $3.99. A charity shop. This one was published quite a while ago. I think this was published in the 90s to the early 2000s. So I found this in a charity shop about 8 years ago, and I'm so happy that I found it. Hopefully you'll be able to find it online. It might still be in publication. It might just be kind of secondhand finding it on eBay, but you guys, this is a really good book. I really like this. I go back to this book a lot more than any of the others, just because it contains so much information. So yeah, those are the main books that I have that I do really like. So a little bit of a recap. If you're a beginner, best to steer clear. I am going to be putting up some more information on this channel about recommended books for beginners. I'm just kind of formulating exactly the list that I'm going to be putting up of books. If there are any beginner books that you would like me to look into, to read, to see if it's any good, let me know and I will read them and see what I think of them. So far I have a few books in the list, but I'm hoping to get more before I kind of share it with you guys so that you have lots of options. So I will be coming out with that, but if you can find yourself a good beginner book, I would definitely recommend that any day over a spell book. It's just way better to go for a book of information than a book of spells. But if you are interested in learning about different paths and practices, different techniques, spell books are really overlooked. A lot of the time people kind of skip past them and instead buy a very specific book on a specific topic. But unless you know that you're really interested in that topic, you might just be wasting your money without getting anything out of it. Whereas spellbooks are a great way of looking at a whole range of different paths right in front of you. You know, you can look at different techniques, different practices, different traditions, so they're really good for that. So anyway, before I repeat myself anymore, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you found it useful. I'm sorry if it was a bit all over the place. My brain is a little all over the place right now. But if you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It really, really means so much to me. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community down in the comment section, feel free to post a comment. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I do post new magical content every Wednesday and every Saturday at 6 p.m. So hopefully I'll see you guys in another video, and I want to say a massive thank you for all of my patrons. You guys have been so amazing and have supported me for a really long time on this channel, and I really appreciate it. And all of your names will be on the end screen at the end of all of my videos, like always. But I just want to say a massive thank you to you guys once again, because you really massively help this channel. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.